Hey there! Thanks for joining us for another episode of Babes in Bookland. I'm your host, Alex Franca, and I'm so excited because my friend Paige is back with us, and today we're discussing Lab Girl by Hope Jahren. Before we get to the episode, here's a review from Apple Podcasts by XX Kit Katie. I love learning about the author's journeys in their books. I enjoy being shown books I might not find on my own. Thanks, Kit Katie. Let's get to the episode. Hi, Paige.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming back. I picked that review because I remember when you finished this book, you texted me and you were like, thank you so much for showing this book to me. I never would have picked this book up on my own, but it had kind of a big impact on you, yeah?
Yes, in fact, when you read that review, I thought, oh, that basically exactly describes my relationship with this podcast.
There's a method to my madness.
I'm Katie, surprise. This book wouldn't have been on my radar ever, really. And I don't know why, because I really did connect with it. And I also was in her line of work, essentially. I got my master's in paleobiology. I dealt with a lot of the same things that she has. I'm kind of not anymore, but I was kind of in the same sphere as she is. So, and I have a lot of friends who are too, and I need to send this book to them because I think that a lot of my female geology fellow students would enjoy this.
Yeah, send it to them, definitely. I loved her memoir as a collection of stories, those triumphs, failures. It was a reminder to me to stay curious and to stay diligent and to look at the beautiful green world around us and do something to save it. There's so much in this memoir, and honestly, I feel like we're just scratching the surface today.
Definitely. I thought that the layout was really cool. It was essentially one chapter of her telling her stories,
Mhm.
and then it was kind of one chapter that was pretty scientific and botanical in nature.
Yeah, and I felt like they tied in together. Like she talked about
Yes.
her childhood and then she would tell us about roots, you know?
Right.
And I
Yes.
really enjoyed learning about it. She does a really good job of taking the scientific language and making it a lot more accessible for someone
Definitely.
like me who hasn't been in that world, the way that you have.
Right.
And already kind of being this plant lady and having an appreciation for nature and being concerned about climate change and like trying to do my small part to help in any way that I can. I really, really appreciated those chapters.
Yeah, they were so cool.
They were so cool, and we're not going to have a chance to get into all of them, but at the end we'll each kind of talk about our favorite one. But I really encourage our readers to pick up this book and devour it the way that it deserves to be devoured because like I said, we're just
Yes.
touching on the surface today.
I feel like that's when you know someone is so smart is when they can take these complicated topics and put it into almost a narrative. Even
Yeah.
the chapters that were focused on the science and the biology behind the plants still read like a narrative
Yeah.
almost
Completely agree. Yeah.
and put in simple terms, able to follow it and then connect it also to the way she was tying it to her life or our lives. She's, I mean, just incredibly smart, you can tell from reading, but also her writing style is not bogged down where you're like, okay, I'm not smart enough to read this.
Completely. Which I was honestly a little worried about at the beginning, I'm not gonna lie. But then it
Yeah.
just sucks you in and it's so vulnerable and honest and raw
Yes.
and down to earth, earthy, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pun
Okay.
intended.
Yeah, pun intended. But let's just get into it so we can get to as much as possible.
For sure.
This book was published in 2016, and this is her dedication. Everything I write is dedicated to my mother. And I want to circle back to that at the end.
Yeah.
So we start with our quick topics. Hope Jahren is a geochemist and geobiologist, and this memoir is definitely part love letter to plants. And I'm a plant girl, so Paige, how many plants do you have?
Oh man, I have pared down.
Really?
When we moved, I had big plant problems, okay, related to our move. And so I had to pare down a lot of stuff from that. And so I have two shelves that are like maybe 3 feet long and they're by the window. So I have plants on both of those shelves. I probably got like 15 on those two shelves. And then I've got plants in a couple of other small places. I maybe have 20 plants in my house,
Okay.
which is pared down for me
Yeah,
because I had a little greenhouse before. I had lots of plants everywhere. And unfortunately, a lot of them didn't make the move that well.
that's hard.
But I can really baby the plants that I do have now.
That's actually a really good point because I counted and I have 37.
Oh my
I know.
goodness.
I know. I will say quite a few of them are the ZZ plants and like the mother-in-law tongue, which are very
Yes.
chill and like don't require a lot. And then I have a couple
Yes.
in those kind of like self-watering containers, which are
Yes,
also very
yes.
helpful. But yeah, I love plants and I kind of do blame you for starting me on my plant journey. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes, apologies, apologies.
My Hindu rope plant is doing well.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
do love my Hindu rope plants.
I love mine too.
It's beautiful. It's such a cool
Yeah,
plant.
it's so cool and so different.
Yeah. Okay. So at one point, Hope writes that some of us have a particular tree from childhood that we remember. You have a tree?
My grandmother had a tree in her front yard. It was a really tall magnolia tree. And so I remember climbing that when I was at her house. And you could go like quite high as well because it has really strong, really big branches. So that's probably the tree I remember most from my childhood. Do you?
I do. So when I was in kindergarten, the school that I was attending for Arbor Day, we all got a tree to take home and plant. And because my dad still lives in the same house, I've been able to watch this tree grow from like this little sapling to this huge
Wow.
tree that, kind of covers our driveway now.
What kind of tree is it? Do you know?
A crepe myrtle.
You should take a picture and post it on the Babes.
I love it. I will. That's a really good idea. Hope is sad to learn when she's older that her favorite spruce tree has died and was being cut down. And she writes, time has also changed me, my perception of the tree, and my perception of my tree's perception of itself. Science has taught me that everything is more complicated than we first assume, and that being able to derive happiness from discovery is a recipe for a beautiful life. So, before we dive deeper, in her prologue, Hope asks us to look out our window and see what we see. So, I'm asking our listeners to do the same. Maybe you're on a walk, maybe you're driving in your car, but if you have the chance, take a look out your window. You'll probably see a ton of man made things: houses, streets, light poles, etc. But if you see something green, you are seeing one of the few things left in the world that people cannot make, invented more than 400 million years ago. If you see a tree, look at the leaf. Hope writes, people don't know how to make a leaf, but they know how to destroy one. In the last 10 years, we've cut down more than 50 billion trees. Reminder that this was published in 2016, so I'm sure that number is larger now. And it seems like nobody cares, but we should care. And I think that she does a really good job convincing you, the reader, that you should care. If you
Yeah,
didn't before,
agreed.
it definitely makes you care even more. Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper, get down to the roots of things, if we will.
Sure.
Let's talk about Hope and her family. She grew up in a small town in rural Minnesota. She writes, the fact that I remember so much cold and darkness from my childhood isn't surprising, given the fact that I grew up in a place where there was snow on the ground for 9 months out of each year. She continues, in almost every one of the houses lived someone that we knew. From playpen to prom, I grew up with the sons and daughters of the girls and boys whom my mother and father had played with when they were children, and none of us could ever remember a time that we hadn't all known each other, even if our deeply bred reticence kept us from knowing much about each other. It wasn't until I was 17 and moved away to college that I discovered the world is mostly populated by strangers. That would be so crazy to go from knowing everyone to knowing no one.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting take and not something that I had really thought about. And I'm sure a lot of people who grow up in really small towns really resonated with that.
Let's talk about her father a little bit. He was a science professor at a community college nearby. She writes, I grew up in my father's laboratory and played beneath the chemical benches until I was tall enough to play on them. But she writes that she and her father would not speak much. She says, we had long since established the habit of not speaking as we walked the 2 miles home. Silent togetherness is what Scandinavian families do naturally, and it may be what we do best. She continues, while I was a child, I assumed the whole world acted like we did, and so it confused me when I moved out of state and met people who effortlessly gave each other the simple warmth and casual affection that I had craved for so long. I then had to learn to live in a world where when people don't talk to each other, it's because they don't know each other, not because they do. So, how do you feel like how did your family teach you to communicate? Did you have open dialogue with your mother, with your father? I know that you're really close with them now. Did you feel like you could go to them with anything growing up? How did they encourage you to feel that way?
That's a good question. I felt like they were open with us, me and my brother, and open to talking about the harder topics that you need to cover, especially with your teenagers, about parties or drugs or, even sex or friendships. They were open with us and they were also casual in their conversation. And so it felt casual to talk about it. And so we did have an open dialogue about a bunch of things. And even in that, they had told me, hey, if there's something that you're not comfortable talking to us about, you can talk to your aunt about those things. I don't think I ever did. But I would love for my kids to be able to feel like, oh, if they can't talk to me, then they can talk to someone else in the family
Yeah.
about it. But I think just the casual nature that they brought it up, it didn't feel uncomfortable for them.
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel uncomfortable either because they kind of set the tone, the casual, comfortable tone of those conversations, even though they were covering some harder topics, some tough, deep stuff.
Yeah.
It was still done in a way that didn't feel intimidating to be open about it.
Without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
definitely remember like there was such a warmth to your house growing up.
Yes. I feel like even at some points we would like try to push her to make her uncomfortable about conversations and she just wouldn't bite.
Yeah.
Like she never bit off on our stuff. So she had it figured out, that's for sure.
Man. Okay, so speaking of mothers, let's talk about Hope's mother. She writes, she was always angry, and I could never piece together why. With a self focus peculiar to children, I convinced myself that it must be because of something I had said or done. In the future, I vowed to myself I would guard my words better. But it is from her mother that she learns to garden, and this is where the first seeds, pun intended, of Hope's love for botany is planted. And she writes about how her mother grew up during the Great Depression and, quote, decided that her children should keep fighting and proceeded to toughen us for a struggle that never came. She continues, I vaguely sensed that there was something we weren't doing, something affectionate that normal mothers and daughters naturally do, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And I suppose she couldn't either. We probably do love each other, each in our own stubborn way, but I'm not entirely sure, probably because we have never openly talked about it. Being mother and daughter has always just felt like an experiment that we can't get right. And my heart just broke for her because my relationship with my own mother is not perfect by any means, but I never doubted my mom's love for me. And I think that that love carried me through some really hard times where I wasn't sure about my self confidence and like my place in the world. And to not have that, to have a mother that you aren't sure loves you, a father who doesn't necessarily encourage you to talk about your feelings, growing up in a cold, dark place. She's setting us up for this journey where we know like this woman is going to have to work through some things.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting the way that as a child she interpreted some of her mother's actions.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay,
How are my children interpreting my actions?
yes. And I'm tired and stressed sometimes, as a kid, you don't necessarily understand that your parents have a lot of other stuff going on.
Yeah.
And so you kind of bring all of this onto you.
You internalize it in a way that you don't understand because you don't have the language for it.
I do think open dialogue and open conversations, even with young children, can help them to maybe not make some of those more hurtful leaps, hopefully.
Clearly, Hope has come back around on her feelings with her mother because, like I said earlier, she dedicates this to her mother.
Right.
But this relationship with her parents, it was something that she would have to work through, later in life, especially when she becomes a mother herself.
Right. And she's very aware of how she wants to do things differently
Yeah,
in her own.
I thought that this part was really interesting. In the beginning of the memoir, Hope writes about having trouble figuring out who she was and how she fit. She writes, "When I was 5, I came to understand that I was not a boy. I still wasn't sure what I was, but it became clear that whatever I was, it was still less than a boy." She isn't able to do the laboratory play out in the real world like her brothers are. She would pretend to be into girl things to fit in. But, quote, "late in the evenings, I would accompany my dad to his laboratory when the building was empty but well lit. There, I transformed from a girl into a scientist." And again, oh gosh, like you feel for this woman who is interested in these things and is made to feel like because of her gender, she has no place in that world. And this is
Right.
another thing that she will be fighting through
Oh, yeah.
throughout this memoir and throughout her life, probably still to this day.
Yes. Yes.
We get a really great understanding of what family life was like for Hope growing up. And then we're kind of jumping around a little bit the way that I've outlined it today, but at one point she meets Bill, and this is the family that she chooses. And she writes, "I didn't so much as meet Bill. It was more like I identified him."
Yes.
Which is such an
Perfect.
amazing way to talk about a relationship. I loved it. They meet the summer of 1994. At this point, Hope is a PhD student and she's the graduate student assistant instructor on a field trip through Central Valley, California. Bill is like digging faster and more holes than anyone else. And when Hope asks him about that, he says, "I just like to dig. I used to live in a hole." And he also tells her that he brought his own shovel for the trip. And he's not kidding. And Hope writes, "Bill dug a hole in his family's yard and lived in it for a while." So he's a zany character.
Yes.
But he sounds lovely. And she writes, "Near the end of the trip, I approached my advisor as he readied the equipment for the next day's work. 'Listen, we have to hire that guy Bill for the lab,' I told him. 'You mean that weird guy who's always off by himself?' he asked. 'Yes, he's the smartest one in the class. We need him in the lab.' 'Uh-huh. And how do you know that?' he asked me. 'I don't know,' I said, 'but I feel it.'"
Yes.
Begins a beautiful and, dare I say, one of the most important relationships in Hope's life.
Yes. And I just love how she finds someone that she can be her weird self with, and he can be his weird self with her.
Yeah.
And that's so important to, because I feel like everybody's a little weird. And I know times throughout my life I felt weird, and that I have friends that I can be weird with that get that.
Yeah.
And it's just great, especially because Bill's essentially her coworker, even though the dynamic is sort of different, kind of changes through the book from him being her student to then kind of being in her lab. They have kind of a journey of a relationship, but essentially they're coworkers. Or at least I feel like even from the beginning, she almost feels like he is her equal partner at work.
Yeah.
Having those coworkers that get you and kind of get your weirdness, and you're able to be your true self with those people at work, it makes all the difference. Almost have like kindred spirits. And only these people that are in this sphere truly understand what is going on and can really identify and work through things together. I thought her relationship with Bill, or their relationship together, was almost the best part of the book. I loved her motherhood stuff too, but I really identified with having your people at work too, because it's
Yeah.
so hard when you don't have that. But it takes time as well.
I think it's such a gift when you find someone that you can be your authentic self with. And with Hope, especially,
Yes.
like her life is her lab later. She eats, sleeps, breathes there. There is no reprieve. There's no going home because she's so dedicated and focused on her work. So having Bill, I mean, he comes through for her and lifts her up and is there for her time and time again.
It was great. Such a great part of the book.
It was amazing. And
And weird.
it was weird and it was unlike anything that I had ever read. And I loved that they were, that he was a man and she was a woman. And like in our society, we're made to feel like men and women can't be friends. And yet here they were, and they were twin flames. I mean, like you said earlier, like they were more than friends, they were more than coworkers, they were more than siblings.
Yeah.
They weren't lovers, they never crossed into that, but like they understood each other and saw themselves in one another and what they needed and filled in the gap. It was beautiful. And you just knowing where she came from and how she had to like, grow up and live her life. When she found this person, you just were like, yes, Hope.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and she told stories about like he cut his hair and put it into the tree hole, and it
Yes.
was like, yeah,
And she just accepted
But
and
it totally fits with their relationship. You're like, yeah, of course he put it into the tree. Where else would you put your hair after you cut it? This
yeah,
is
exactly. There was no judgment, just acceptance. And it was such a beautiful thing. They experienced some high highs and low lows together. So Bill is awarded his bachelor's degree at the same ceremony that Hope is awarded her doctorate. And she writes, neither of us had family in attendance. And so we found ourselves awkwardly sitting on the sidelines while other graduates were hugged and photographed. After an hour of this, we agreed that no free glass of champagne was worth the torture. And we walked back to the lab. Once we got our lab coats on, everything felt normal. He just seems to get her. Hope writes that she started chewing the back of her hands, which is something that she tried to hide from others, but something
Mhm.
that she had to do when anxiety took over. It was like her coping mechanism. Bill notices this and says, we used to have a dog that chewed her paws. I know it's gross, I said, flooded with shame. No, he said, she was a great dog. We didn't give a damn. When you have a dog that good, you let it do whatever it wants. You're
Yes.
just like, yes, Bill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He literally just compared her to a dog. And
But
and
it
you're
worked
you
for
at the
her.
end you're like, yeah,
And you're like,
you're
yes,
a cool dog.
that's
Okay,
what
you
she
can do what
needs.
you want.
Exactly. She spent so much of her life, I think, feeling wrong.
Right.
Being a young girl, wanting to be in the world of science and feeling like that was wrong. Maybe wanting to connect to her parents and feeling that was wrong. And then
Right.
she's like, yeah, I know I do this thing. I'm wrong. And Bill's like, you're not wrong. You're just you.
Yeah, that was great.
Hope invites Bill to join her in Atlanta, where she has secured a job to build a lab. She writes, it wasn't the first time that I would walk away from everything I knew and everything to which I'd become attached, knowing I could never go back. It was, however, the first time that I have a for sure friend at the place where I was going, and I knew enough to thank God for that.
Such a huge difference.
When they connect in Atlanta at the start of the school year, Bill remarks that Hope looks quite different. She writes, he was right. I wasn't sleeping much and I had lost quite a bit of weight. I'd always been high strung, but this felt like something different. I have anxiety. It's my new thing, I explained. And she's feeling really anxious because for the first time, she has this lab that's all hers and she feels extremely responsible for having some sort of like return on the investment in her. That's a really difficult thing for her to cope with, especially as we learn that like it is a tightrope that these scientists have to walk when it comes to research,
Yes.
especially the type of research she does, which we're going to get into it more specifically really soon. But just to kind of give the listeners, they're like, wait, why is this woman so anxious? And it's like, well, because she feels an extreme amount of pressure on herself right now.
Yes.
Extreme. Has there been a moment in your life where you've kind of felt overwhelmed with anxiety and like how were you able to come out on the other side of that?
Yeah, I mean, I had postpartum anxiety after I had my second really bad. I had a traumatic birth with her,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of anxiety surrounding that birth situation. I took medication to kind of get over the hump for that. Even now, I have times at my job that are incredibly stressful for me. I have to work nights and I have kind of a lot resting on my shoulders during that time. And that's a very high anxiety time for me. And it's hard on my body as I get older. My body is less and less able to process through the anxiety chemicals that my body produces in order to move past that after it's over. I end up cutting down my coffee consumption. Exercise helps a lot for me. During my last stint last year, I got into stargazing because it's nice. You just kind of like lay down and look up at the stars. Do I deal with it well? Probably not. I'm just trying to like get by essentially or get through those sections.
Yeah, the more that we just start talking about the mark that anxiety and stress leave on our bodies and the way that these things are very real, I think it can help us all not feel weird about it or like it's wrong and, help us help each other with things that work for
Right.
ourselves. And, obviously it would be so much easier if you could just tell your body, hey, we're not anxious anymore. But it just doesn't work
Right.
that way. There is a physiological reaction that happens.
Yes, I think that's a good point, though. It wasn't until my adult life, I mean, in my relatively recent adult life, that I realized that some of the stuff that I was feeling physically was a result of anxiety and stress.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're finding things that work for you and continuing hopefully to find more things
Yeah.
that work for you so that you can help release this stuff.
Yeah. Now, the thing I really try to avoid is anxiety over things that have not or may never happen.
Yeah. Welcome to my life.
If I'm having anxiety over things that are real that I'm going through, okay, I can get through that. I don't like the way that I feel, but this is important that I do this and finish this.
Sure.
When my own brain is giving me anxiety over situations that are completely made up by my
Yeah.
brain,
Yeah.
that is not
You
okay
get
with
pissed at
me.
yourself. You're like,
That is
come
not
on.
okay.
Reel yourself back. That's kind of what Hope struggles with while she's building this lab too. She's convinced herself of all the ways that can go wrong, all the things that like she won't do right. And that's the nature of science too. Like that's the nature of experimenting is you don't know how it's going to turn out. And so I
Right.
can imagine that the struggle, I mean, she's so great about articulating how she feels.
She really does tell the story and the plight, I guess, of the academia world, specifically the science world that she's in. It is insane to get the funding that she needs. You know, she's unable to pay Bill a living wage for a
He
period.
starts living out of his car. Yeah. Feels guilty about that.
Yeah, that's a heavy, heavy weight.
So they spend 5 years building this lab and making it into the thing that they want it to be. In that time, Hope gets a dog, Reba, and they fall into a beautiful, frugal routine. As we were just talking about, Hope is struggling at the lab, and a lot of it has to do with the pressure to perform so she can keep the grant money coming in, which I promise we will get into more detail. I keep saying we'll get into more detail later, but we will because especially with everything that's been going on in our country as of late, I want to talk about what this grant stuff really is. But she writes, as hard as I worked, I just couldn't get ahead. Showers became a bi-weekly ritual. My breakfast and lunch were reduced to a couple of cans of Ensure from the cases that I kept under my desk, and in desperation, I once threw one of Reba's milk bones in my purse so that I could gum it during a seminar. I just love how honest she is.
Yes.
She continues, I passed the workday biting my nails with ferocity. My brief forays into romance had convinced me that I would be relegated to love's bargain bin. None of the single guys that I met could understand why I worked all the time, and nobody wanted to listen to me talk about plants for hours anyway. Everything about my life looked pretty well messed up compared with how adulthood had been advertised to me. After some years in Atlanta, Hope is running out of money and time. She writes about how scientific progress can be stifled by personal issues. Quote, evaluation is heavily slanted towards track record, the number of significant discoveries that have resulted from previous contracts. Thus, a brand new researcher was at a serious disadvantage. My understanding was that new scientists who have new ideas are looked down upon. She writes, my early years as a professor were spent trying to persuade the world that I had used an unusual method on unorthodox samples to gain a surprising result via an untested interpretation. The whole thing had come out of left field, and I was naive in thinking I could ever win over my audience who had decades more research credibility than I did. My early career had all the makings of a long, slow academic train wreck. She continues, I was extremely terrified. Ever since I was a little girl, I had longed to be a real scientist. And so soon after finally getting close, I was in danger of losing it all. So she's got this project that she's working on. And like she had just said, she's coming to these conclusions, but she's doing it in this way that like is not the way that it's quote unquote supposed to be done. And I do feel like it's weird because our society doesn't tend to, it's like on one hand, we love the trailblazers and we love when people come out and like do these things and we're like, oh my God, that's so new, that's so innovative, that's wonderful. But it feels like actually people just want you to shut up, do it the way that it's been done. If you try to step out of line, if you try to bring any nuance to a situation, you're told it's wrong. Progress gets stunted because of ego, tradition, fill in the blank.
Competition. It sounded like, at least the way that the system is set up, the other people in her field are sort of motivated to not have her succeed because then she would get a portion of the money that wouldn't be going to them.
Yes. And we do have to point out that she is one of the few women in this field. Whether
Yes,
that has something to do with it, it does, or not.
definitely. Yes. It was very eye-opening to read her description of how the grant system works and is not really set up for innovation or progress, like you said.
Yeah. She's nearing a mental breakdown. And she writes that she feels like she was failing all of the women scientists who had come before her and that their faith had been wasted on her. She writes, with my mind thus running in pointless circles, I'd get more nervous and then unbearably achy, starting with my knees and elbows and spreading to my ankles and shoulders. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, rocking back and forth for a half hour or so. When I couldn't stand it any longer, I'd call Bill. So just like you, Paige, she's feeling it, literally feeling it.
Yes.
She writes about giving Bill all of these what ifs, these thoughts that are plaguing her. What if they don't get the money? What if I'm not smart enough? What if we lose everything? And Bill yells, we all need a Bill. He yells, fuck what if? None of that shit will change anything. So what if you don't get a grant? You can't pay me less than you do now. If we built this shit once, we can build it twice. Thank God she had Bill. I really
Yes.
feel like Bill was her guardian angel.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay, so we'll get back to Bill and Hope's journey and like what she does next. But let's pause to go even deeper on why science for Hope, specifically her field, and what being a scientist means to her. I thought that this part was really interesting. In the beginning of the memoir, Hope writes about having trouble figuring out who she was and how she fit. Her mother encouraged her to read, and not only that, but truly analyze what she was reading. And this caused trouble for her when she started school and would be punished for reading ahead of the class. She writes, I didn't know why I simultaneously feared and adored my female teachers, but I did know that I needed their attention, positive or negative, at all times. Tiny but determined, I navigated the confusing and unstable path of being what you are while knowing it's more than people want to see. She continues, when I was 5, I came to understand that I was not a boy. I still wasn't sure what I was, but it became clear that whatever I was, it was still less than a boy. She isn't able to do the laboratory play out in the real world like her brothers are. She would pretend to be into girl things to fit in. But, quote, late in the evenings, I would accompany my dad to his laboratory when the building was empty but well lit. There, I transformed from a girl into a scientist, just like Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man, only kind of backward. And again, oh gosh, like you feel for this woman who is interested in these things and is made to feel like because of her gender, she has no place in that world. And this is
Right.
another thing that she will be fighting through
Oh, yeah.
throughout this memoir and throughout her life, probably still to this day.
Yes. Yes.
Well, your dad was in the science world,
Yes.
and it never occurred to you when you decided that that was your path, that that was something that you shouldn't be doing because you were a woman
No.
or a girl.
No, my dad was the one who introduced me to this path because he worked with geologists at work.
So the world of science didn't feel closed off to you at the beginning during your educational journey when you were in college and then started working, and maybe that shifted a bit.
Right.
She writes, I knew that if I had told people I was studying what it's like to be a plant, some would dismiss me as a joke, but perhaps others might sign on for the adventure. I didn't know for sure, but I felt the first delicious twinges of what would be my life's enduring thrill. It was a new idea, my first real leaf. Just like every other audacious seedling in the world, I would make it up as I went along. Let's all be audacious seedlings.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. So she went to the University of Minnesota. That's the same school that her mother, father, and all her brothers attended. She starts out studying literature, another love of hers. Like we talked about earlier, her mother introduced reading to her at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
But she quickly switches to science. She writes, people are like plants. They grow toward the light. I chose science because science gave me what I needed, a home as defined in the most literal sense, a safe place to be.
Yeah, very cool.
It is really cool. She writes this, my desire to become a scientist was founded upon a deep instinct and nothing more. I never heard a single story about a living female scientist, never met one or even saw one on television. As a female scientist, I am still unusual, but in my heart, I was never anything else. Let's talk a little bit more about specifically what she does, the incredible work she's done and the discoveries she's made over the years. And she will explain how difficult it is to be a scientist in our country, even though the work is so necessary and valuable. She writes, the type of science I do is sometimes known as curiosity-driven research. This means that my work will never result in a marketable product, a useful machine, a prescribable pill, or if it does indirectly lead to those things, this would be figured out much later at some much later date by someone who is not me. As a result, my research is a rather low priority for our national budget. Okay, so another reminder that this is from 2016. She writes, based on a rough cost benefit analysis, I need to do about four wonderful and previously impossible things every single year until I fall into the grave in order for the university to break even on me. This is complicated by the fact that the money for every single other thing, chemicals, beakers, post it notes, a rag to polish the mass spectrometer, all has to be raised through me, written or verbal supplication for federal or private funding, which is diminishing rapidly on a national level. This is not the most stressful part. The salary of every single person in the lab, aside from my own, also has to be raised by the same mechanism. It would be nice to promise an employee who has sacrificed everything for science and works 80 hours a week more than 6 months of job security, but that is not the world within which the research scientist operates. If you're reading this and wish to support us, please give me a call. It would be insane of me not to include that sentence. She writes, as much as I have loved being a scientist, I am ready to admit that I am tired of all the hard things that should be easy by now. And it's just like heartbreaking that she's writing this in 2016. Things have gotten vastly more difficult for her,
Yeah.
especially over the past few months. She writes, the life of an academic scientist is ruled by her 3 year budget. Every third year, she must solicit a new contract with the federal government. That money is how she pays the salaries of her employees, buys her equipment and materials, like she said earlier. She writes, if she fails to land a deal within the first 2 or 3 years, she won't be able to do the work that she was trained to do. If a new professor expects to have a job 10 years hence, she has no alternative but to succeed. This is all greatly complicated by the fact that there aren't nearly enough federal grants to go around. We're all realizing where the stress and anxiety comes from. She
Yes.
writes, ask a science professor what she worries about. It won't take long. She'll look you in the eye and say one word: money. She goes into much further detail about this in the book. And, it's frustrating to me as a person because her work is so important. We should value innovation and progression. And we all know that there are some huge issues that are coming up for our generation and the generations next, our children. And if we're not encouraging and supporting the research and the work, what are we doing?
Right.
Not everything is about producing a product that makes money. Sometimes it's about doing something to set yourself up to succeed much later. Like, shouldn't that have more value?
Yeah, I felt the stress reading through these chapters. And I also feel like this money has to come from somewhere. I mean, it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
And I remember my advisor in grad school constantly applying for grants, and we would write abstracts to apply for grants while I was there. It was a constant thing, and I know she deals with the same thing that Hope does, and it was always on her mind, is where is she gonna get the money for this research?
So you figured out pretty early on, like, you didn't want to continue down like the academia path.
I mean, I honestly have a hard time seeing how people can see how the system works and then want to continue through in that. Is incredibly stressful. Obviously, we need people that want to do that and feel passion for that and research. But the way that it's set up right now, it's just,
It's brutal.
yeah, it's brutal. Didn't sound good to me at all. And honestly, it
Right.
doesn't sound like it seemed very good to her either.
Yeah.
She
She
was
just
just
kind of,
passionate about that.
yeah, that was just who she
So,
was. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about being a female scientist. She, already wrote earlier that she feels unusual as a female scientist. She writes, I learned that female professors and department heads were the natural enemies of the academic world, as I was privileged to overhear discussions of my sexual orientation and probably childhood trauma from 10 to 10:30 each morning through paper-thin walls of the break room located adjacent to my office. By these means, I learned that although I was in desperate need of a girdle, I was better off than one of the other female professors who would never lose all that baby weight by work all the time. Yikes, just the ingrained
Mhm.
misogyny that, like, Hope already has so many hurdles to
Yes.
jump over. Like, really? We have to add this one? Like, when can
Yes.
we move past this?
Right.
I'm like her. I'm just getting tired. I'm just getting tired.
Yes.
But I will not stop. We won't stop moving forward. Have you ever felt uncomfortable being a woman in your
Oh,
field?
uncomfortable being a woman. Yes. I mean, even yesterday, I was at a conference and old men, not all of them, some of them just don't know how to be professional, honestly. And so comments about, oh, it's a pretty girl, stop at my booth and talk to me. It's like, okay, that's not how to have a professional conversation with someone. The way that I feel about it, it's kind of like when earlier in the book when she said, oh, when I was 5, I realized that I wasn't a boy. And I didn't know what I was, but I knew that I wasn't a boy. And so I kind of had something similar when I started working. So in school, I was in school for geology in my bachelor's and master's. We were pretty well split 50-50, female and male. When I started work, that was not the case. It was maybe closer in geosciences, but company-wide, certainly the female population was the minority, probably by a pretty long shot. And so when I started work was when I realized that I wasn't a boy, in some way.
Yeah, yeah.
I even had early on, really early on, within probably my first working year, I had a boss who I was the only girl on the team and he wouldn't tell me stuff. But we would get into meetings and he would be in a meeting and he would say, oh, I think I came around and talked to everybody about this, but I didn't get to, I don't think I got to talk to Paige about it. So I'm just going to go through it here. He was uncomfortable talking to me.
Wow.
And people are even now, and I kind of joke with my friends, my weird friends at work. Like I can tell when a male coworker is not comfortable with my presence in the office. And so I always say when I see them in the hall, I'm gonna go, boo. They're like,
It's me, a woman. The DEI hire. Ah.
but you know what? Really early on, really pretty close after my realization at work that I was not a boy, I really just came to the conclusion that is actually a personal problem for them.
Yeah,
Like that is completely unprofessional on their part.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to do with me. It really doesn't.
yeah.
And you know what? People always say, oh, complaining about this or that generation. There's bad workers in every generation.
That's true.
There's bad people in every generation too.
That's true.
It's easy to identify the people who are struggling with me, and I just work around them.
Good for you. I love that you're like, that's not my problem. That's their stuff that they have to figure out. And I'm just gonna keep doing my best damn work every day.
Yeah,
Now, I feel like I would be remiss if we didn't talk about this because it's so topical, but like, have you ever felt like your value has been questioned because you are a woman in your workplace? All this talk about DEI hires and, all the companies are rolling it back now because all these people were only hired because of the color of their skin or because of their gender, instead of the fact that like maybe they actually were the best for the job. Like, have you ever had that moment where you came up against that?
what I feel is that in my jobs, I've had essentially 2 jobs at 2 companies. When I started those jobs, I had to work harder to gain the respect and trust than I thought or that I think my male counterparts had to work in order to get that.
Even if you were at base level more qualified or had better grades, just because basically you have two boobs and a vagina.
Yeah, yeah, I just feel like you have to work harder to kind of get over that hump if you're a woman. And that's just the reality that we're living in right now. And the good thing I see is that our generation, millennials, and I don't work with anybody who's in Gen Z, but Gen Z is entering the workforce now as well. I have not felt that with my millennial coworkers as much as I have felt that with the older generation of coworkers.
So maybe the tides are changing.
Even the women.
Yeah.
And the women want you to fall into a certain type of role and persona as well at the office. We've struggled just as much, if not more, with the older generation of women in the office. And part of it is, oh, we struggled and we went through this, so you've got to go through this as well. And then part of it is just,
Ingrained misogyny.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And the way that they do things is not the same way that we do things or conduct ourselves or interact with our coworkers. It's tough for them.
Yeah, because they felt like they had to play a game, sort of. And, you guys are coming in and being like, we're not playing the game, we're changing the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's this really cool moment where, getting back to Hope, she writes about this really cool moment where she had a mentor professor, Ed, who later, when he's retiring, offers Hope a bunch of his lab equipment that's headed for the dumpster. And she jumps at the chance because now at this point, she's building her new lab in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins. When she arrives at his lab, he takes her around introducing her, showering her with compliments. She writes, he told me I was the hardest working student he had ever seen and that he knew I was special from the first time he met me. I kept my head down so that no one would see my embarrassed smile. After he finished, I looked up at Ed and said, thank you. Then I cringed as one by one, the people to whom I was being introduced to sized me up and down, each of them wearing a look that was very familiar. It was a look that says, her, that can't be right. There's a mistake somewhere. Public and private organizations all over the world have studied the mechanisms of sexism within science and have concluded that they are complex and multifactorial. In my own small experience, sexism has been something very simple: the cumulative weight of being told that you can't possibly be what you are. Mm.
Yeah.
She just nails it and how she lays it down.
Yeah, so yeah, very eloquently put, but also just succinct and just right to the point.
Right to the point. Okay, so we're going to get into meeting her husband and motherhood. But before we do, Hope writes a lot about these camping trips and excursions, I guess, that she takes. And we don't have time to cover all of them, even though they're very interesting. And she meets Bill on one that we talked about
Yes.
earlier. But I know that you had to take quite a few of these things to get your
Yes.
degrees. I know when you were going on them, I would talk to you and I would be like, what do you do when you're on your period? And you're like, well, you just gotta figure it
Oh
out.
yeah.
But do you have like any one specific story that you want to share or?
My simplest story is that Brett and I started dating on a geology field trip, a 6-week geology field trip. That was fun and something that we reminisce about all the time. The other one is, and I don't think they do it like this anymore, but when I was in school, the rule was that you had to do your work in the field alone. You weren't allowed to work with a partner or anything. Everything had to be your solo work. And so also, and you know this from growing up with me, I have absolutely no sense of direction. Like I get lost incredibly easily in the car, and being in the field was no different. And so at one point, this was my sophomore year, I think. So this was one of the first trips that I had been on. I got lost. I got lost after lunch. When you're in the field, a lot of times you're just walking around.
And explain really fast, like what does in the field look like? Are you in like an actual like field in Texas? What actually, didn't you go to Colorado for one of them?
I mean, I've been in the field in a lot, most of the Western US, including California and New Mexico. We've been in the mountains. This particular trip, we were in sort of central Texas, which is scrubby brush, mesquite trees, trees that are like maybe a foot or two taller than a college sophomore. So you can't see anything. And what you're meant to do is look, at least what we were doing on that specific trip was we were looking for contacts on the ground, formational contacts, where you could see the rock changing, and where you saw it changing, you would mark it on the map, and then you could tell what the structure looked like from that.
So you're just walking around looking at the ground,
Yes, yes. And that's what
walking. Oh my God.
for a week straight. And you're in this brushy area with little shrubs and little trees, and there's not a lot of it on the ground, so you can still see the actual earth underneath you. So after lunch, I get to walking off into the sunset, apparently. And I realize when I'm like, okay, it's about time to head back to the van, that I don't actually know how to get back to the van, and I've
Oh
been
my
walking
God.
for a long time. And so I'm trying to make my way back to the van. I've already missed the cutoff where you're supposed to be there. And so I'm getting a little nervous. I have a whistle because
That's good. You have something.
you're meant to have a whistle. So I was
Yeah.
blowing my whistle. And I walk into this little clearing area, and I see these little pigs and the pigs I have seen are like little potbelly pigs. They're like the size of a puppy, right? And
Okay.
so I see these pigs, I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm gonna stay the course because I feel at this point that I know the course to the van. And these pigs are on it. So I'm like, I'm not gonna detour. I'm gonna stay the course. These pigs can't do anything. They're like puppies. I get within maybe 5 feet of these little puppy pigs, and their mom stands up from behind the bushes, and she's the ugliest animal I've ever seen in my life. She's about comes up to my waist.
Oh
Just
my gosh.
disgusting teeth like that you can see visually. She's huge. She's this big boar. And I just froze. I
Yeah.
had come up on a wild hog with her babies in the
Oh my
field
God.
alone.
And for people who don't know, hogs can be extremely aggressive.
Extremely aggressive. And anytime you come upon a wild mother with her
Yeah.
children, I didn't know what to do. So I just stood there. I'd never seen one before. Like I said, I thought the babies were the grown-ups here. Okay.
Oh my
And
God. I know
so
that you make it out, so I'm just laughing. I'm like crying. I'm laughing so hard right now.
So I just froze, which thankfully was actually the right thing to do because apparently their vision is quite bad. So she
Okay.
heard me walk up, but apparently she didn't see me even though I was literally right there. So they then scamper off. They leave.
Okay. Good.
But I was terrified, obviously. I was crying then,
Yeah.
now as
Yeah.
well. I had a pocket knife in my backpack, so I got my pocket knife out. Not that I could do anything with it. Opened it while I was walking because I'm like, I'm not gonna have time to open this if I come across anything else. So I had it open in front of me, like Indiana Jones going into a tunnel or something. And I'm walking and it's getting dark. Like it's getting dark and this area I guess was maybe a hunting lease or something because there's deer blinds. So I was deciding at what point I would get into the
Yeah.
deer blind for the night.
And a deer blind is kind of like a tall tower that is like a little man-made treehouse situation
Yes.
for people who don't know.
Yeah, which thankfully those were there. That actually gave me like some comfort that like I could get into the
Yeah.
deer blind. So I was walking anyway, blowing my whistle with my knife out, and finally I hear my professor. And so he comes on me. I'm still crying, and I've probably been crying for an hour. This it probably took me another hour after
Oh
I
my
came onto the
gosh.
pigs. It's dark. So I'm crying. I've got my pocket knife, and he he comes up and he's like, "Let's put the knife away." He's like, "Are you okay? What happened?" Now I'm like, okay, stop crying. I'm like, all right, I'm out of geology. I will not be here tomorrow. Please, we need to find a way for me to get home. I'm not doing this again. And he's like,
Yeah.
okay, let's get to the van. So we get to the van. I'm humiliated as well because the rest
Yeah.
of the class is waiting at the van and they've been waiting for a long time for me.
Yeah.
Went back to the hotel. I thankfully I had some really good friends because I was like, you know what? I'm done. I can't show my face. I'm leaving the major. This is it for me. This is not my thing. And one of the guys came in and he's like, no, you're not. He's like, we're going to dinner. Nobody cares. And he's like, I
Oh.
don't just get in the car. Like, we're going. And then the next
Yeah.
day, my professor's like, hey, there's a fence line. And he's like, you're not leaving. Like, we can't, but like,
Yeah.
logistically, there's no way for us to get you out of here. He's like, all I want you to do is just walk up and down this fence line. Okay. I'm gonna stay on the fence line. Do your mapping from the fence. Can't do it from the fence. He goes, you're gonna get a B. All right. So just walk along this fence because this trip was a class, self-contained. This wasn't part of a class. It was its own class.
Okay.
I'm giving you a B. Don't worry about it. Because he knew I was like quite interested in having good grades. So I just walked the fence the rest of the time, turned in some absolutely made up paper because I didn't leave the fence for the rest of the time. Then actually what I've heard since then is that now you're meant to work with a partner
Yeah.
in the field.
And have a compass, maybe.
Yeah, well, I had a
Can you keep your
compass.
phone on you at this point?
I had a phone, but there's no service out there. I had someone because I that was my sophomore year, and then I stayed through in the same department and got my master's. And so years later, I actually had someone tell me that story of the girl who got lost and ran into the pigs. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's actually me."
Oh my gosh. You made it on the other side, but that is a fantastic story, Paige.
There's lots of funny field stories. She tells some funny field stories.
She does.
Yes. It's just fraught with peril being in the field for these geology courses.
Well, I look forward to your memoir one day when you write all of them down. Oh my gosh, that was incredible. Thank you so much. Let's get back to Hope. So good.
Yes.
She meets her husband on a day that changes her life forever, she writes. His name is Clint. And she writes about their date, how she was too distracted by the notion that something wonderful was happening to eat, how she didn't want to leave him at the end of the night. And they meet in early 2001 and get married on a trip to Oslo that summer. Bill acts strangely when they get back from Oslo. He's questioning his place in this new relationship. He's like the third wheel now.
Right.
Though it reads to me that there was nothing sexual ever between Bill and Hope. I mean, would you agree? Like, it
Yes,
never.
agree.
Clint is very kind and makes sure that Bill understands that he is still very much part of the family. So, Hope picked a good one.
Yes. Green flags all around.
Yes. And this is our last big section before we wrap up the episode. Hope writes about motherhood. And she writes about how being pregnant is the hardest thing she's ever done. Physically, it's extremely uncomfortable and also mentally.
Well, she's on medication that she can't take during her pregnancy.
In Atlanta, she had suffered a mental breakdown, and Bill was there for her, and she gets put on medication. And then when she gets pregnant, she can no longer take this medication. And she is feeling a lot of anxiety about that. And she writes, a manic depressive pregnant woman cannot take any of the things that she's been taking on a daily basis for years in order to keep herself from hearing voices and banging her head against the wall. The statistics are pretty simple. A bipolar woman is 7 times as likely to experience a major episode while pregnant compared with before or after. Leaving her to ride it out without medication for the first 2 trimesters is the cruel reality upon which doctors insist. For me, it's really tricky because while on one hand, I completely understand why someone would be extremely fearful of
Yeah.
giving up this medication that keeps them, stable. On the other hand, unless somebody else has like been the test subject and their child has been the test subject, how do you make that decision to go through pregnancy and also be like, and at the end of this medication that I've taken, who knows how it's going to affect
Right.
my unborn child at this point, or myself.
I mean, I think there's a lot of women who are unable to take medication that they're used to taking for lots of different things, and it just adds another layer of stress and anxiety into your pregnancy that's already just a very stressful and unknown time.
It's an uncharted landscape and it's different for every woman, no matter how much all of us, like I know I turned to you so much during my pregnancy and during the first few years of both of my babies' lives. I mean, among other things, but you were like the one person that I really reached out to specifically in regards to that often.
Mhm.
And there was only so much that you could tell me. And
Right.
like our experiences were vastly different.
Yes.
There's only so much you can prepare for. So she has this beautiful chapter on mania. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. Chapter 9. And in section 2, Wooden Knots, that describes her experience. So, like we've already mentioned, she has her narrative journey and then she ties it into these botanical chapters. And then she really puts you in the shoes of someone going through a manic episode.
Yes,
And
she
it was
does.
so moving and enlightening for me. And there's no way to break it down or simplify any part of it, so I'm not going to, but I wanted to bring it up and it's just one more reason why I think people need to pick up this book on their own
Yes. Yeah.
and read about it because this was like a really difficult decision for her. She has a difficult relationship with her own mother, with her own family, and like with childhood and parenthood. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Right.
There's a heartbreaking moment for Hope when she's told she can't enter her lab while pregnant due to liability concerns. Because
Yes.
remember, her lab is her safe place, it's her
Yes.
home.
Right.
And she writes, I cry because I can see only what I'm losing and not what I will gain, which is hidden from me by my 2-inch thick uterus.
Yes.
And it is true,
Yes.
like you gain so much in motherhood and in parenthood, but like you lose a lot too. And I feel like you're almost like not supposed to acknowledge that,
Right.
because you're like just supposed to be grateful. And
Yes.
you are so grateful. I'm
Right.
so grateful. But like life completely changes when you bring children into this world.
Completely.
And you have to figure out how to navigate that and like to already have so much judgment coming from the outside to where you can't even feel comfortable speaking up and being like, whoa, but like this part's really hard.
Right.
That's why it's so great to find your people that you can talk about that stuff with. And I feel really lucky. And you are definitely one of those people for me.
Yes, same. I mean, it goes both ways. And it is hard, especially going from 0 to 1 kid, you lose your freedom, essentially a lot of it. And it's a hard pill to swallow. It's not really something you can prepare for.
Totally. Pregnancy is not the happy journey for her that she feels it's supposed to be. Instead, it's full of grief and mourning. Just like we were saying, she writes, for the part of my life that is over now that the baby has come. And she has a lot of anxiety. She writes, I try not to think about my troubled mind. I try not to wonder when will be the next time that I lose my mind. I don't recognize the person in the mirror. She looks so sad and tired and greasy that I feel sorry for her, even before I fully understand that she is me.
She has so many lines that are almost just like
Yes.
poetic.
Yes, poetic. And you just feel so seen by this woman
Yes,
who's never
yes.
met you.
Right.
And you're like, how did you do it?
Yeah.
You magician. When it's time for the baby to come, she writes about the experience. It's a teaching hospital, and she's calmed by the bright lights and the hospital buzz, the science of it all, right? Even laughing during the moment when the professor tells the medical students that Hope, quote, has a severe risk for postpartum psychosis and will be observed accordingly. She is the science experiment now.
Yes.
She has a wonderful nurse that she feels comfortable with and a great doctor, and she feels like she's in good hands, which is a lovely feeling when you're giving birth.
Definitely.
You want to
Yes.
feel that way. She has her son. I love this part. She writes, you just had a completely healthy 9-pound baby, says the young nurse with a smile. I smile back at her. I must be stronger than I look. All women are, my doctor adds, while scrutinizing the womaniest part of me. And yes, I teared up there in the book. I cried a
Yes.
lot during this motherhood passage.
Yes, yes, it was very poignant. Yeah, I identified with a lot of her section on motherhood. Really, the whole book, I heavily identified with her.
Yeah. She writes that Bill surprises her by hugging her for the first time in 11 years.
Yes,
And she says, I am amazed to see how easily and willingly he settles into the role of the beloved uncle.
that was so sweet. We love that journey for Bill.
I know, me too. Me too. Uncle Bill. She's nervous about being a parent, not having the best relationship with her mother herself. And she writes, I realize, as I often do, that a problem has eluded me not because it is unsolvable, but because its solution is necessarily unconventional. I decide that I will not be this child's mother. Instead, I will be his father. It is something I know how to do and something that will come naturally to me. I won't think about how weird my thinking is. I will just love him, and he will love me, and it will work. Perhaps this has been a million-plus-year-old experiment that even I couldn't screw up. Perhaps this little beautiful baby at whom I stare at anchors me to yet another thing that is greater than myself. Perhaps it will be one of the greatest privileges of my life to watch him grow and give him what he needs and let him take my love for granted. Perhaps I can do this. I have help. I have enough money, I have love, I have work, and I have medicine if I need it. Maybe they that sow in tears actually shall reap in joy. Perhaps I can do this too. And of course, you could tell I got emotional reading that. It is so hard to bring someone into this world and like you love them so much and you just want to do so right by them, you know?
Yeah, and I actually have taken comfort myself in thinking about people have been doing this for for so long. Maybe it's the, geologic time frame that I love to think in, but it's like, yes, people have been doing this for a long time, and a lot of people have not done well, but a lot of people have done really well. So I have taken some solace in that too, in my moments where I'm like, I can't do anything right. I don't know what I'm doing here. Keep going forward. People have been doing this for now, I will say, 1 million years.
Yes, exactly. And you can do it too. You
Yes.
can do it. She talks about how, like, miraculously, when her son is born, everything about being a scientist is easier. And she's like, I'm not really sure why, but like contracts come to her, funding. She could chart Bill's salary for a year at a time instead of month to month. She writes, once I wasn't stressed to distraction about our survival, my patience returned and I'd rediscovered my love of teaching. The combination of freedom and love is a potent one, and it made me more productive than ever, which is so beautiful. And it was so nice. You just wished this for this woman,
Right.
some sort of relief, some
Yes.
sort of ease. In 2008, they moved to Hawaii. Bill comes along, of
Of
course.
course.
And this is where she settles and lives, at least where she is when she writes her memoir. She writes this really lovely passage at the end of chapter 11, and I sobbed while reading it. So, good luck to me right now. It's in this passage that she also fully accepts and acknowledges that she is her son's mother. She writes, I can say that now, for only after I released myself from my own expectations of motherhood did I realize that they were something I could fulfill. I feel like you and I are pretty good about that. There's no like pretense that this is supposed to be this easy, perfect thing
Right.
because we talk to each other
Yeah.
about it, you know?
Yeah. I feel like it can sneak up on you. I do feel like for the most part, we have a pretty good expectation for ourselves. But I do feel there's times where I get this like sneak attack. I remember one where when Jordan started kindergarten, I was then introduced into stay-at-home moms because my kids had been in daycare and daycare moms work. That's why they're in daycare. And it didn't even cross my mind, which is why I think it really blindsided me, is that I was then in this world where some of the kids in her class had stay-at-home moms and they were way more involved with the kids than I could be.
Yeah.
And it's hard and it's still hard
Yeah.
to not meet that expectation from
Yeah.
her, really. So
Yeah.
and so's mom was here, and that's just not my path, but it's hard to accept.
Yeah. One day she will see what your path laid out for her, and all I hope for you is that you don't compare yourself. That's all and I know it's so hard. I know it's so hard. Oh, I wish I could give you a hug right now. I hate that we're separated by miles.
It's a roller coaster for sure. But I feel like Hope went on that same journey, and it's not even one journey. I feel like it's new journeys all the time, and new stages of life that bring new journeys. And
Yes.
yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like she looked at her son almost as one of her work subjects, and she would observe him. And I feel
Yeah.
like that with my kids too. But our kids
Yeah.
are just little experiments in and of themselves, and the stuff that they're doing. I'm like, oh, okay.
Approaching your children, approaching your life from like a place of curiosity as opposed to approaching it from a place of judgment or expectation, it makes things a little bit like there's such a relief to that.
Yeah.
Because then it's like approaching something from a place of unknowing, but like a beautiful sense of unknowing, this idea that like we'll figure it out as we go and we don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
I loved that she talked about that. She writes, "Before my son was born, I anguished over whether I would be able to love him. Now I worry that my love is too vast for him to understand. I realize now that my son was the end of a waiting that I didn't even know I was doing, that he was both impossible and inevitable. Life is funny that way. While my son was growing inside me, I did the breathing for both of us. Now he's growing up and I have to let him go a little more each day. I have learned that raising a child is essentially one long, slow agony of letting go." And this is where I was like, damn it, Hope. Like I was not expecting you to hit the nail on the head so well.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, that line about being both impossible and inevitable.
yes.
So
Yeah.
good. Well, she says that, and I know you're going to do this eventually, but my favorite botanical chapter is chapter 3 on seeds. And that's where she says, I think that might be the first time she says that a tree is both impossible and inevitable. And she's going through what the seed has to go through to become a tree. And then she brings it back later when she's talking about her kids. And it's like such a light bulb moment. Yeah, both of my kids are impossible that we would get them,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also, inevitable.
Yeah.
It's
They were
it's just
always meant
such
to
a
be yours.
cool way to think about it. I just love that.
I love that too. You just mentioned your favorite chapter was about the seed and its journey to become a tree. I just adored her parallels to plant life and human life. And like I mentioned earlier, we have no time to go over all the incredible ways that she describes how plants live and grow and die and parallels that to humanity, her experience and our experience as a whole. And she does also include some really cool experiments and studies that she's documented, why those were important to her. I love the section on roots. And she writes, "No risk is more terrifying than that taken by the first root. Rooting exhausts the very last reserves of the seed. The gamble is everything, and losing means death. The odds are more than 1,000,000 to 1 against success, but when it wins big."
Very cool.
Just little snippets of how extraordinary those chapters are.
Yes.
And just giving her this full circle moment in her memoir. She writes this at the very end because she's pondering what it would be like to have a daughter, even though she knows that she's not going to pursue pregnancy again. And she writes this: "Being a daughter was so difficult for both my mother and me. Maybe our line needs to skip a generation in order to extinguish a cycle such that it cannot be repeated." But she thinks about her hopeful future granddaughter.
Yes.
And she writes, I can't resist my temptation to put a message in a bottle. Somebody remember. Somebody someday find my granddaughter and tell her. Tell her about the day that one of her grandmothers sat looking out of her kitchen window with a pin in her hand. Tell her that her grandmother didn't see the dirty dishes or the dust on the windowsill. Tell her that in the end, she decided to go ahead and love her granddaughter several decades. Damn it. Probably because we have daughters that like it's me too,
Yes.
but I think about future generations too. Tell her that in the end, she decided to go ahead and love her granddaughter several decades too early. Tell her about the day that her grandmother sat in a sunbeam and dreamed of her.
Beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And like, it's important. It's
Yeah.
important that we're not just selfish and thinking of ourselves. It's important that we make this world better for our
Yes.
grandchildren and our great grandchildren. I just adored this book. It was just beautiful. Absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, short and sweet to the point. I mean, the book really wasn't that long. It really packed in so much. And then to include also the scientific portions on the plants as well. I mean, it's a masterpiece. I loved it. And to think, I mean, I don't know, I really thought this, but like, could we even get through recording a podcast on it without crying? No.
No, I cry in a lot of my episodes. So at this point, I've just accepted it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. This book was just a reminder that life is one big giant experiment. And
Yes.
I cannot look at plants or trees in my neighborhood. I notice them now.
Yes,
I
same.
look at them differently
Yes.
after reading this book.
Yeah.
And I have one last quote, and then I have a request, which I've never had a request at the end of a
Mm.
podcast. So she writes, each beginning is the end of waiting. We are each given exactly one chance to be. Each of us is both impossible and inevitable. Every replete tree was first a seed that waited. And I know that that was from your chapter that you picked.
Amazing. Yes. The hope, like these seeds are waiting and hoping for a beginning. And even throughout your life, you can have these different seasons, and they all now are like a seed in your life waiting.
You never know what will bloom from the seeds that you plant. So
Yes.
keep hoping, keep moving forward.
Yes.
Okay. So, Hope would like all of us to plant a tree. She writes this on page 282. She says, if you do this, you'll have a tree and it will have you. You can measure it monthly and chart your own growth curve. Every day, you can look at your tree and watch what it does and try to see the world from its perspective. Stretch your imagination until it hurts. What does it want? What does it wish for? Wonder if you are right. Go back the next day and reconsider. When you're a scientist, it means that you're doing it right. So I'm going to go buy a tree. I'm going to go get a lemon tree. And if anybody else out there wants to go buy a tree, you can get really, really small ones for not, they're not super expensive if you get them
Yeah.
small. And
Yes.
they always say the best time to plant a tree was yesterday, and the second best time to plant a tree is today.
Love that. Yes, we will plant a tree as well.
Okay, yes, and we will take pictures of them and I'll put them on the Instagram when this episode drops. Paige, thank you so much for going on this journey with
Oh
me
man,
today.
thanks
We
for having
laughed, we
me.
cried,
Yeah.
we felt seen. It was a beautiful book. Thank you for
Yes.
talking about it with me.
Yes, and I want to give props to you because you do such a good job at including so much of the book in your episode. So I really appreciate that because most of the episodes, I read a few of them, but most of the episodes I haven't actually read the book, but I still come away getting really good takeaways from them. So you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Oh, I love you. Thank you for being here for me. Thank you for being a guest. I can't wait to have you on again soon.
Yes.
Our next book is it's gonna be a fun one, so I can't wait.
Maybe we won't be crying.
We probably will. Knowing me, we're gonna cry. Come on. All right. I love you. Thank you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Babes in Bookland. To access the full version of this episode, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or support us on Patreon. Visit babesinbookland.com for more information.